We are back once again with Erika Brown of The Cricket coming to us from our office in downtown Manchester by the Sea. Erika, we have a lot going on right now we got to get to ASAP.
I'm tired.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
obviously,
tired.
yeah. Well, the big news, right, was the Essex town meeting, which just passed, and there was a lot of action there.
Yes, it was a two-nighter, which it's been a long time. I think, with electronic voting gadgets and all this other stuff, and people working and all this stuff, it's very unusual to get a two-night town meeting anymore. Well, they had them in Essex this past week. It was a whopper. It was a 42 article warrant. And they had a pinch hitting sort of temporary, what do you call them, acting town moderator for a massive town meeting. And Jody Davis, I always have to, because it's not Jody Harris, it's Jody Davis. Jody Harris is on the Economic Development Committee. Jody Davis did a great job, actually. He handled it quite well. There were 462 voters who showed up the first night, and literally it was standing room only in the cafeteria of the Essex Elementary School on Monday night. They were really there for two articles, or two groupings of articles, and they were, one was the school district and the school district related overrides. These are Proposition 2.5 overrides, which, comes from the 1990 law that no town can increase its budget by more than 2.5% in a given year. One thing I didn't realize about Proposition 2.5 overrides, though, apparently, and I've got to double check this, what happens is the 2.5% increase, if it is approved, then it becomes a permanent increase in the budget, which is kind of interesting. But in any case, it's sort of like a cost of living kind of cap. So they had to go for an override with regard to the school-related expenses. The first one, which was the biggie, was $200 and something thousand for the Manchester Essex Regional School District. I'm looking at this for my notes just so I make sure that it's correct. But the school district, we've been talking a lot about how the budget, even though they trimmed like almost $800,000 from their budget in the last year. The last 6 months during the planning process to try to accommodate the fact that the school district is just becoming more expensive. And it got passed. The 2/3 majority got passed for both the Manchester Essex Regional School District, and then there was a second override for the North Shore Agricultural, the old Essex Aggie, the technical high school, and that was for about $55,000 for the override. So between the two of them, they were about $340-ish thousand. And they both passed by the 2/3 required majority. But I have to say, the articles for the overrides and the school district budgets that go with those overrides, because those were together, there were 4 articles, one for the override, then the second for the budget, one for the override of the technical school, and then the budget. Those 4 articles, articles 3, 4, 5, 6, I think they took until 10:15 at night. So we were at Article 7 by 10:15 of a 42 article warrant.
Did anyone run out for coffee then?
It was bad.
Yeah.
But, and then there were a lot of gamesmanship that was happening. So it was really interesting. If I was laughing with somebody and I said, there are a lot of new people and new faces, kind of young parents who've moved to Essex in the last, and they're going to their first town meeting, right? I talked to several of them. And I thought to myself afterwards, if you know how you say if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. Well, if you can make it in a town meeting in Essex, you can make it in a town meeting anywhere because it's almost like watching speed chess for the procedural moves that happen. So it was interesting. Everything goes for a reconsideration because they know that the technicality of, bringing something up, you can only have one reconsideration per night. These are all like kind of obscure kind of technical procedural issues with town meeting that for most people would be like, what? But in Essex, they know them well, which is kind of interesting. So they went through those things. Here's the thing with the overrides and the school budget. It's not done because an override requires a simple majority. It's a 2/3 at town meeting. but then it goes to the ballot, which is tonight, Monday, or today. They're voting on it today, May the 8th in Essex, and it's on the ballot there, and both of those overrides have to get ratified, and we'll know tonight if that actually happened or not. But that's a simple majority at the ballot. But then again, the ballot is secret and private, and town meeting is not, unless you call for a secret ballot, which Dawn Burnham did, and she actually didn't get what she wanted. However, Jody Davis, after 2 efforts unsuccessfully to try to get an accurate hand count for that vote, they ended up going to a ballot, a secret ballot, just for accuracy. And then anyway, it passed. So that was number one. The second thing was that Apple Street. Remember last week we talked about the Apple Street eminent domain thing? Right. That was kind of interesting to watch because, by the way, I won't bury the lead. It failed. It failed. It failed to get the required 2/3 majority in order for the town to be able to take, I think there were 7 or 8 strips of land along Apple Street on the southern side of Apple Street. And what they want to do is they want this project to widen the road and raise it because they need it as a backup for emergency vehicles if the causeway downtown gets flooded, which it's happening more and more now. Mm-hmm. So the folks from Apple Street said this is a quaint, rural, scenic road, which it is. It's a scenic road in Essex, but it's also a emergency vehicle. It's also a designated cut through for emergency vehicles, and that's the rub. So Apple Street folks were getting up and you could understand they're defending their charming street, and they don't want more people on Apple Street. That's the bottom line. They don't want more people on Apple Street. So the fact is, it's a narrow, often dangerous, street. They don't want to widen it out and make it more accessible because, it would require taking down trees, and they love it just the way it is. So that's the difference, and it failed, which is interesting, and that leaves the town in a position of saying, okay, so what are we going to do about this now, in terms of this project, because they are going after federal funding, I think it is, or state funding to make this a pass through for, fire trucks. You got to imagine a fire truck, because think about it, if you can't pass through with a fire truck and there's a fire on one end, and the causeway is flooded and you can't pass through Apple Street is it. And if you can't pass through it, you have to go all the way around. If you're in Hamilton, you have to go to one way and then if you're on the northern side or the northern side, you have to go through West Gloucester. So, and go on 128 or go through Manchester to get there. It's to the other side. So it's an issue. My guess is it's not going away.
Yeah, that's a toughie.
Yeah, there were other random things that were, random's the wrong word, I apologize. Other things that were sort of considered that were interesting. One of the things that was passed over, which would have been a very interesting discussion to listen to, was that bylaw proposal from the Conservation Commission. And they voted to pass over that and indefinitely. So I don't know if that means it's not coming back, but that was also something that people were really looking at and saying, we're going to need to, we're going to need to take a look at that. That would have been a lot of debate, I think.
Right.
I don't know, but there you go.
Yikes. Erika, I wonder, going back to the Apple Street project, what happens when there's a fire on Apple Street?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. My son actually, and this is a true story, my son was in the rain with a friend of his going to music, a guitar class or something like that over on, over at, Tommy Ello's place, anyway, whatever, doesn't matter. And they were going along Apple Street and not speeding. It was just that it was dark and it was rainy, and they went right over the edge, right where they want to widen it and raise it, and went right over. The entire truck was pinned on its side against a couple of trees. I mean, it is so narrow and it's on this kind of just big drop off. So it's already dangerous the way it is. And the lands they want to take, it was funny. Some people were getting up and being very dramatic, and they were saying, it's a half an acre of land anywhere on Apple Street. That would be at least $500,000. But they don't say that it's $500,000. I mean, it's 8 pieces of strips of land, teeny strips of land, literally on 4 feet along the side of the road. So you're not going to do anything with that. You're not going to be building your dream house.
My lemonade stand. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But listen, you got to remember, this is people's homes. They own them. This is their private property, really. And Essex has a strong history of having this kind of live free or die taste, a little bit of New Hampshire on Cape Ann. And so the idea of the rights that you have for the property that you own and being able to decide on your own property what you're going to do is a deep rooted ethos in Essex. I mean, and this is the kind of thing where you run up against it, where people say, hey, that's a great idea, but that's my property.
Right. Okay. Good stuff. Upcoming elections.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. We're back to Manchester now. But yeah, Manchester, we finally have our elections next week. We had our candidate forum. And it's going to be, everything is pretty much straightforward in terms of just one candidate, one seat. So there's no choice. But there are 2 contested races, where people are actually competing, where there are more candidates than there are seats. And so that's next week. And the heat is on the planning board, where there's 4 people running for 2 slots. And then there's also less heat, I would say, just because there's been less activity from the challenger, Karen Bennett, who is running on the select board, 2 seats, 3 candidates. She's running against the 2 incumbents, Ann Harrison and John Round. So we'll see what happens there. The polls are open on Tuesday. So we'll have one more chance maybe to talk about that before that actually happens, but that's coming up. I think a lot of people will be happy when that just gets settled and we know where that all falls.
Right. Busy spring here in and around Cape Ann. Erika, thanks for the update. We'll see you this time next week.
Bye, Kory.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.